Now speak to Dr. Andrew Meyerson, an NHS accident and emergency doctor in London. Good to have you with us. There'll be patients hearing about possible strikes in the NHS, worrying that they may not be able to get the care that they need when they need. What do you say to them fearing that as they watch now?
So to patients that are watching this and seeing strike action develop from many different professions within the NHS, I think that we need to ask ourselves why this is happening. If we look back in the last 10 years, we've seen the NHS, which was ranked #1. It was the best healthcare system in the entire world, ranked 10 years ago by the Commonwealth Fund. We've seen that ranking slip multiple positions in the last 10 years. We've seen the NHS underfunded to a massive degree, so that we have now a funding crisis, we have a staff crisis, we have a beds crisis, and we have a social care crisis. And we have a government that has refused repeatedly to listen to any health experts and any of the warnings that we are putting out. It's just very disheartening watching patients suffer on the longest waiting list in NHS history. We're talking 7 million people long now, and it was 5 million before COVID. So COVID made it worse, but it was quite bad before then. And we have 132,000 vacancies in the NHS. We have 165,000 vacancies in social care. Our doctor and nurse pay has been cut by 25% since 2008. And we're hemorrhaging staff at the moment. We lost 40,000 nurses last year. We have really experienced, well-trained people, consultants, GPs, experienced nurses that are leaving the profession in droves because it's just getting too difficult to work in the NHS right now.
Is that simply about pay, or are there deeper issues that could not be addressed? Even if a more generous pay award were to be given, were to be agreed, even if that happened, wouldn't you still have a situation where people are leaving because of the pressures and the effect on their mental health and the effect on their life outside the job? They decide that they simply can't continue.
Well, look, the pay restoration package is the most important of those things that we can offer to staff to try to retain them. And we just need a government that will take this issue seriously, that will see that we are hemorrhaging doctors and nurses, that it is becoming too difficult to work in the NHS, and that they need to do something about it. I made £14 an hour as an NHS A&E doctor last year. Okay, we have nurses that are visiting food banks. An increased pay offer is going to go quite a distance, in quite a long way, in making sure people feel a little bit more secure, especially in this cost of living crisis. Inflation is at double digits now, and that is a tax on working people, and that's something that we all have to deal with. And if you work during the pandemic, if you kept this country going during the pandemic, then it's a slap in the face, a clap in the face, to think that it is okay for nurses to visit food banks after the heroic work that they did. And so that's why, the pay is a huge issue, and staff are leaving in droves. But we need a government that actually listens to us, that actually understands that there's a £20 billion hole that needs to be filled, that we need an urgent plan to deal with staff retention and recruitment, that we need a plan for beds, we need a plan for social care. And despite trying to raise these issues locally in our hospitals, and then regionally, and then with national NHS leaders, and then also with our royal colleges, trying to do this in a polite way, nobody's listening. The government is not listening, and patients are suffering so much right now, and it is so heartbreaking to see this. And that is why we are considering strike action, because no matter what we do, they just won't listen to us. And so that is why we're standing up for patients in the way that we are.
Dr. Meyerson, there'll be people watching who will identify with the situation you described: staff shortages, waiting times very long for them to have procedures and so on. And they may sympathise with the argument you're making, but may still be worried that with hospital frontline workers, NHS frontline workers, if they decide to go on strike, that people won't get the care that they need in an emergency. And what can you say to reassure them or address that immediate concern that they have about the possible strike action?
Well, I just want to remind them that they're not getting the care that they deserve right now. We've seen too many horror stories of grandmothers and grandfathers spending 10 hours on the floor of their homes or outside waiting for an ambulance to show up that just isn't there because we are just too overworked and too overstretched at the moment. How much longer does everybody expect us to wait? And how much worse does the situation have to get? We do all of this through the right channels. Yet this government doesn't take this seriously, and the patients are suffering right now.
I think they would say that they do take it seriously, but there are so many costs.
Actions speak louder than words.
But there are so many different funding demands. I mean, because if they put more money towards the NHS, what if they then have to take that from council budgets and social care? That will have a knock-on effect. Or do they take it from defence spending and then potentially it puts in peril the situation as it stands in Ukraine? It's part of a bigger picture, isn't it? And some would say that you know, if one department or one part of you know, the state benefits, the others will have to suffer even greater cuts in order to fund that.
I disagree with that entirely. We could institute a 1% wealth tax on people who have more than £5 million in their pocket, and that would give us the money that we need to survive this, so that working people, especially nurses, don't have to visit food banks during this cost of living crisis. We have the wealthiest prime minister in history, who has double the amount of wealth as King Charles himself. Then we fight through the pandemic, and my nursing colleagues are having to visit food banks. That is unacceptable. A 1% wealth tax on people with that level of income is not going to bankrupt them. It won't change their lifestyle. They will be perfectly fine. They will still be obscenely wealthy. And then the rest of us, though, can survive. That's what we're talking about, survival right now. And we refuse to be plunged into austerity 2.0. We've seen too many cuts. We've seen too many people dead. And that's why we're raising this issue, because too many patients are being harmed right now, and we have an obligation to protect them.
I mean, I suppose the difficulty is that I've heard it said that people will revert to this idea of a wealth tax the very richest, but the sums that we're
people that have more than 5 million.
But yeah, the sums that we're talking about that are needed, that wouldn't even come close to funding it. And we've seen the problem of when the government did try and have unfunded measures, the way the markets reacted, borrowing costs for the government and individuals went up.
Unfunded.
When they announced plans for tax cuts that were unfunded.
Nobody's saying to not balance a budget. It's obviously we have to come up with a plan that funds this properly. Look, the money is there. They always find the money for everything else. When it comes to nurses trying to not visit food banks and survive through the pandemic, then we're asking for too much. I think the greed of a lot of these people is shocking. And after what we've been through the pandemic, we lost 2,000 of our colleagues. I think that it's okay for us to say that, you know, we shouldn't be just barely surviving the way that we are right now.